Well, hello and welcome. Welcome to the Breaking Bias Summit and welcome Genesis to our conversation today. I am so grateful and excited to have you with me today. I've known you for, I think, over 15 years. We've
A
been on
long
this
time.
long time. So I met Genesis and she's been an inspiration of mine, has really helped inform a lot of my work around breaking bias when we were at NYU together. So we're part of this program known as the NYU Reynolds Program in Social Entrepreneurship. I was at the law school. Genesis at the time was pursuing a career in music. She's a rapper, a performance artist, and since then has just gone on to do so many things. She's an acclaimed poet, a peace activist and artist from Biloxi, Mississippi. And she's also the founder of Strive Till I Rise and People Not Things. Her work has been featured in media across the town, from Associated Press to the New York Times to Vice. And she often uses theatrical protest during her live performances to bring attention to both global and localized issues around racial justice, peace movements, queer visibility, and gender equity. There's so much more to say about Genesis that I'll share. But actually, before we get to learn about Genesis, I'd love to hear some of her poetry to start us off.
Thanks for having me, Anu. It's always a pleasure to be in a space with you. I'll share a short one from my new book, People Not Things. It's called I Ain't Free. The illusion of freedom is far more dangerous than jail cells and cramped cages. My tax dollars killed a child yesterday. I ain't free, neither is she. And my freedom is dependent on the imprisonment of another. I ain't free, neither is he. Short and
Wow.
sweet.
Wow. Can you tell us a little bit about this poem? Because I have so many questions, but I want to hear how these words came to you.
I just think about freedom and the saying that if we're not all free, then nobody's free.
Nobody's free.
And I really was thinking about that quote and thinking about in the ways in which my freedom is dependent on the oppression of another person, whether it's just me existing, and like to exist is to pay taxes here in America, right? So I don't really have a freedom of dictating where my taxes go.
Yes.
Right? It could be used to bomb a child in Palestine. It can be used to imprison my Black brothers here in America. It could be used for whatever, or it could be used for good and the welfare of other people, right? I don't get the chance to dictate that. I'm not free, so.
I really love what you just shared, because what you're speaking to is this crucial idea that Dr. King talked about, that Thich Nhat Hanh talks about, this idea of interbeing, interdependence, right? The idea that we are so dependent, our existence is dependent upon other beings at all times. And as you make these connections in such simple words, right? Like these like little truth serums that you throw, you're really talking about how this simple act of paying taxes, this idea of giving money, is funding so much violence, which prevents me from being free. So what does freedom mean to you, Genesis? What does it feel like?
The first two lines of the poem is the illusion of freedom is far more dangerous than jail cells and cramped cages. Because when we think about freedom collectively, sometimes we think, well, I'm not in jail, so I'm free, right? I'm not in a jail cell. I'm not in a cramped cage, so I'm free. And in so many ways, there, of course, it's a privilege to not be locked in a jail cell. So there are freedoms that come with that. But the illusion of freedom is very dangerous. Well, I have the freedom to choose who my politicians are going to be or who the president's going to be. But when it comes down to it, I really have two choices that are given to me, basically force fed to me, right?
Yeah.
That is an illusion of democratic freedom. That's just an example. So we have to be careful to really take a step back and ask ourselves, in what places are we actually free? And then what are we doing with that freedom? With the privilege of freedom that I do have, am I trying to get somebody else free? Or am I just like, well, I'm good, so he could stay in that jail cell, or that a Palestinian child could stay over there. Like, what am I doing with my freedom?
Yeah, because we're basically completely connected, right, in this global sense. So tell me a little bit about who Genesis B is, outside of the accolades, outside of these professional titles and all the things you've accomplished in your life. Who is Genesis? How she came to be?
Genesis is a highly flawed, highly sensitive, introspective, introverted, people-loving, animal-loving, nature-loving person who sees the whole world as art and beauty. I see the beauty in almost everything. But yeah, I start off with saying I'm a flawed, sensitive person. So I am someone who every day is unpacking my shit. We talk about breaking biases, unpacking my own biases, unpacking the programming that I've been fed through community, family, media. Growing up here in America, we're just bombarded with other people's thoughts of who I'm supposed to be. So I spend my time clearing out to get back to who Genesis is at my essence,
No, that's beautiful. And what does breaking bias mean to you? Why did you say yes to have this conversation with me?
I said yes because we're on the same mission. I feel
That's
like
right.
you see the programming for what it is. You see what I like to call the industry of division for what it is. And some will go their whole lives without understanding the programming that we grow up with, and see and not question the things that I'm projecting on other people, the traits that I ascribe to other people. Are those my own thoughts? Are they strictly based on my experience with that group of people? Or is this a programming that I've been fed, but I've never questioned, just accepted it as an inevitability, right? Back to freedom. Is my mind really free if I've never questioned what my community taught me, what my parents taught me, what my American propaganda has taught me? And a lot of us aren't privileged to go outside of America and travel. I've been very privileged with my art and my music to travel different places around the world. And that's when I realized, whoa, I've been in a cage. I haven't been free. My mind hasn't been free.
Yeah. And what you really mean is, like, we've been so limited in seeing our own potential, right? And particularly as people with marginalized identities, as a Black person, as a brown person, as a queer person, we're constantly told these ideas about who we ought to be. And sometimes we succumb to them, right? We succumb to these socially conditioned expectations on us, of us. And I've seen like your journey of always fighting back. So, or transforming it, or just like choosing a different route, being like, okay, that's cool, good for you, but I'm gonna go this way. Particularly as you were pursuing your career in music, I saw that. So, it was the most obvious thing I saw. Where did that come from? Like, what really inspires you on this journey towards freedom, and not just freedom for yourself, but collective freedom, liberation?
I think about my grandfather. His name is Reverend Clyde Briggs. He passed away at age 42, I think in 1967. Might be getting that date wrong. But he and his community, like his comrades, really fought for the dignity of the Black community in Mississippi and Franklin County. And that dignity included the right to vote. That dignity included equality in education, right? And like the standard and quality of the schools. And, there shouldn't be just 2 teachers for 400 kids, right? Like that's not good enough, right? So he really fought and against the odds, against the KKK, White Citizens Council, the police of Franklin County, who, there was a campaign of harassment and attempts on his life the year or two leading up to his death, right? Shooting into my father's childhood home. you know, while there was my pregnant grandmother and 6 children, 5 children are inside, right? So he really, and people like him and people like him, who we learn about, if we're lucky enough to really learn about our history here in America as Black Americans, really went up against the power.
Yeah.
And put their lives on the line, put their bodies on the line for my generation and future generations, so that we have more freedoms than we did back then.
Yeah.
And that just really stuck with me as a kid. Like my father always made sure I knew where I came from.
Yeah.
You know, the power of the legacy of my name.
Yeah.
So I just think about him, and it made me have no fear of death or fear of, you know, losing money or, you know, loss of funding. So I just say what I want to say, because it's like, I want to be free.
Yeah.
My
And you are
grandfather
free.
fought for me. Yeah, fought for me to be free. So what does that mean? Does it mean that, you know, I'm going to bite my tongue because I don't want to lose funding, or because I'm going to get arrested, or I'm going to die? No, that's not freedom. Like I'm striving to be as free as possible. I still don't feel completely free. I fight every day to push the envelope of like, what does that really mean? Because if this person's not free, I have to use my tongue, use my talents to advocate for their freedom now. So I can never really be fully free.
Yeah. And I feel like, first of all, it's so beautiful because, did you say he was a reverend?
Mm-hmm.
So
several churches in Mississippi.
Yeah. So I want to kind of come back to that in a second, the role of faith in our just justice work in general, in your family and in contemporary movements. But the other question, like one thing that, you know, I haven't shared about you is you basically were part of this huge campaign to get the Confederate flag off of the, you know, the Mississippi state flag, right?
Sure.
Which is, I mean, when you were doing this, I was like, oh my God, I hope you don't get shot. Because it is such a matter of pride for so many people, particularly particularly white people from that region.
Sure.
But I feel like your work is not just freedom for those who are oppressed, but also the oppressors. So can you comment on how you went about taking on such big power structures for this campaign?
It started off with a one-woman protest at SOBs in New York. It was at a rap show, and like I protested Confederate Heritage Month. So that's what Mississippi, the governor at the time, declared April Confederate Heritage Month. Something they still celebrate, by the way, in April. And no one knew what I was going to do. My manager didn't know, the club didn't, the venue didn't know. But it was at this packed, sold out show called Faces in the Crowd. And I draped myself in a Confederate flag and I put a noose around my neck on stage, held up a fist with the rope, and had some choice words for my governor. And someone snapped a picture and that went everywhere. When I say everywhere, Anu, like New Zealand Times. And I was just like, okay, this very localized issue has now been spread just because of that picture, right? Or the death threats that came after that picture was posted online. That's what people were really posting about, the Associated Press. And all of a sudden it was a topic that was not just local to Mississippi, it was nationwide. So people were online. This is 2016. If you recall what was happening in 2016, like Trump was coming into power. He would be sworn into power later that year. I did this in April. So of course, lots of backlash, lots of support too, but I didn't know it would do all that. I had no idea. I just wanted to say my piece. I've been saying my piece for years in, you know, speaking my mind. I didn't know that would happen. And then it kind of threw me into an ongoing fight that was already happening for 120 years to change the Mississippi state flag.
Yes.
Yeah. So then I started to get involved with that. And part of what I would do was have civil discourse sessions with millennials who were on the opposite side of the issue. So neo-Confederates, folks who wanted that to fly, like that's my heritage. And folks like myself, descendant of the unique slave, descendant of civil rights activists, you know, Black Americans who were like, well, Mississippi's dang near 40% Black. I don't feel like it represents me, you know, and humanizing the issue by just like sitting down and talking to each other face to face.
Yeah. So how did y'all do it? So I know that Mississippi adopted a new flag in 2021, which
Yeah.
is kudos.
Thank you. It's still
Uh,
surreal, man. It's still surreal when I drive in my hometown and I see that new flag over the schools that, my nieces and, nephew will attend.
yeah,
I used to have to walk past that every day to go into my school or
which
in the
is so,
judges in court.
as
Yeah.
a Black person, as a person of color, as a queer person, it's so triggering to see a symbol
Oh
of
yeah.
hate,
It's a
right?
slap in my face. It's letting me know, well, because the cornerstone speech of the Confederacy was very blatant and to say the only highest potential of a Black person is that of servitude, is that of a slave. That's what the cornerstone speech is, of the Confederacy. So every time we see that, where it's like, well, this is how they feel about us. What does that do to a kid's self-esteem to see that if they're
Of course not.
not actively in their household being taught, no, your potential is greatness. You could be great. So anyway, yeah, God blessed, and so many collaborators worked so hard to get that flag changed, from Mississippi Rising Coalition to Anjanou Ellis, to Judge Carlos Moore, Maisie Brown, the student protesters. Like, it was a relay race, and it
Yeah,
finally came down, at the height of the George Floyd protests. May he rest in peace. I can't
amen.
talk about that triumph without mentioning his name, his spirit. The SEC and NCAA said that they'll threaten to boycott Mississippi if it didn't come down. So it ended up being about money.
Of course.
Of course. Like, always.
No, but it's, part of it is like, sometimes I think about George Floyd and his spirit, right? He's almost, he had to give up his life for so many things to change. So in a way, he was an angel, right? In a way, he was a bodhisattva, in the Buddhist tradition, because he sacrificed, not consciously, not even willingly, possibly,
Right.
but at a soul level.
Definitely not willingly.
Yeah, we all witnessed that. So, but I mean, with that said, kudos, right? It's incredible that through your voice, you were able to really bring such a dramatic shift, change take place in our society. And what is the role of faith in all of this? Because one of the things that I've been challenged with in the last decade, well, since I've started my own social change journey, is when I look at history, when I look at historical movements, all of our ancestors, including your grandfather, who is your ancestor, I feel like, leading us, protecting us in so many ways, we're so grounded in like spirituality of some sort. Like my ancestors in India, the Indian independence movement was completely grounded in a cross-faith spirituality, right? Hindus, Muslims, Christians, Jews, Parsis, everybody. And it was about like, this is about our freedom, our liberation. Same thing with the civil rights movement. Yeah. And what role does that have for us today as we ask for those same things our ancestors asked for? Basic human dignity.
The truth, those same things that they fight for, that we fight for, that humanity will always fight for, the majority of us, the truth, the human dignity, it's a river that runs through many countries. The truth is a river that runs through many religions. It's the same river. It's the same truth. It just might take on a different form. Might go through Kenya, might go through Christianity, might go through atheism even.
Yeah.
So I feel like I try not to put any emphasis on one religion, because we have change makers, prophets, lovers from all different types of religions, and some who don't. But I personally was raised Muslim. Both of my parents converted before I was born. But they also, so every Friday we would read the Quran out loud as a family and do our family prayers. But my father also made sure I knew and read the Torah and the gospel.
Wow.
And especially my mom is still a heavy follower of Christ's teachings, even though, she converted to Islam as well, to show us that these same concepts, these same people are in all of these books, the same prophets. It's like, whoa, because he knew one day I would grow up and
Yeah.
I'd see people using Judaism or Islam or Christianity as a buffer to kill people, as a buffer
Exactly.
to control people, as a buffer to separate people. And he wanted
Yes.
me to know the truth, that when people do this, it's not of these religions. They're just using the religion for power.
Yeah.
The truth is people of, we call it people of the book. And in the Quran, the affectionate term for Jewish folk and Christian folk, the affectionate term are people of the book.
Yeah.
You know, brethren, you know, it's
Yeah.
not. So I was just taught, you know, I was taught love. I was taught interconnectedness. And I got to give my father, his name is Ishmael B, John Ishmael B. I got to give him props, man. He was on some other, even in the Quran, every time God is described as a he, when we read out loud, my brothers and I, we would never say he. My father said, don't say he, put God. Because of course God has no, if you
Gender.
believe
Yeah.
that, and then yeah, God, how can God have a gender? Like, that's
Yeah.
asinine. That's asinine to think,
Yeah.
right? So even then, he was, you know, making
Wow.
sure like God is not he, she, like just say the word God when you come across he. Right.
Yeah,
So yeah, he was on some other shit.
no, I know, but that simple act, you know, kind of taught you to break biases at such a fundamental level, right? Because so many of us conceive of the divine in a masculine version because no one questions the patriarchal notions of our society, the misogyny.
No one questions.
Yeah. So it's so amazing. Like, you know, you come from such a rich family, rich in not wealth, but maybe wealth as well. But what I mean is just this tapestry of experiences. Yeah, exactly. Tapestry of
we were
experiences.
cared for. I put it like that.
Yeah,
I didn't
rich
come
in
from
love.
wealth, but
yeah,
my parents made sure when this generation, my brothers and I, that we would never want for anything. So I got to give them props for that.
That's amazing. So what was your moment of obligation to kind of pursue this work as an artist? And, you know, I see artists and poets as kind of seers. They kind of see what's happening in the world and they're able to communicate it to us, to the rest of the public, so we can wake up. Just that short poem you read, I'm like, oh my God, such a pithy way of capturing such profound truths. So yeah, like when did you realize you had this power, this gift, likely from God?
It never felt like a gift, but the first time I was aware that I knew as soon as I could, and when I got big and I got strong and was big enough, that I would stand up for children and stand up for folks who had trouble standing. I was probably 6 years old. It was a year after my dad took me at age 5 to a KKK rally at age 5 as an opposing voice. My father was there with his bullhorn yelling back at the KKK folks, brought me and my 2 older brothers. We were just little kids. I didn't know what was going on. I remember the imagery. I remember like the iron crosses and the Confederate flags, like these things, swastikas and things. And he said, I later asked him, like, why did you bring kids to that?
Yeah.
And he goes, I wanted you guys to understand that racism is alive and well, but you don't have to fear it. You can stand up to it. That's what he taught me. A year later, age 6, I remember my dad watched the History Channel all the time, and he would watch it with us. I saw the Holocaust footage for the first time at age 6, like graphic footage of people being targeted and hurt and killed, children, for simply being Jewish.
Yeah.
And my little brain couldn't. I said, why are they hurting those little kids? My dad tried to explain it as best he can, just because they're different, really.
Yeah.
You know, this is what evil looks like when you kill a child, you kill innocent people simply because they're different from you. That's when I knew, because I started writing poetry really young too, like 3rd grade, 4th grade. That's when I started like trying to reflect on these things that I was seeing that my father was showing me and processing of like, why is this? What needs to
Yeah.
change? Understanding like very complex socio-psychological aspects, like contemplating these things at really young age, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade. So when I told you I was an introvert, like this was me as a kid in my room, writing poetry, trying to make sense of it with my dad. Other kids didn't really understand, but I don't know. That's really when it started, when I saw children being harmed by adults, and I had to make sense of it. And it's been a journey ever since then.
No, it's beautiful. And what you're describing is really this felt sense, somatic experience of injustice, of unfairness, of brutality, right? Even though it was happening to other people when you were watching those, I mean, when you were at the KK rally, it was happening in your body, but to even notice it and not suppress it, but to feel it and then respond to it. And like, that's so, I mean, I think for
helpless.
Me, yeah.
Being a kid, I said, when I get big enough, this is what I'm going to dedicate my life to. And I have.
Yeah. And you certainly have. And it's just so inspiring to kind of hear like the origin story or part of the origin story of how humans like you come about, right? And to serve, not just other humans, but our planet and our future generations. One thing that's kind of come up for me is, as we think about, and I've been questioning this for a long time, particularly after going to law school and studying this idea of justice, right? And kind of social change, social justice circles, this word is thrown around a lot, and as someone, you've thought about this, you've reflected on it, it's a big part of who you are. What does justice mean to you?
I don't know. I don't really have a strong opinion. I think it depends on who you ask. Those who are on the opposite side of justice and have injustice done to them. Yeah. I think they're the ones to ask, hey, what does justice mean for you? Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying that it should just be anarchy and everyone inflict their own sense of justice. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I just don't know how to answer that.
So what does the word justice feel like? How's that? What does it feel like in the body or in the mind? If you have access to it.
I don't have access to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I told you, I'm a flawed person, and sometimes I'm a dark person, and then if I think about deeply enough, if someone harmed me enough or harmed someone that I love enough, I don't know what justice would look like for me. Yeah. If I'm being completely honest with you. And so I'm hesitant to say, because when I think about the justice system, it's so much injustice that it has my mind flipped around of like, what does it mean? Well, okay, this person goes to jail and they do their time, but that time also includes torture. It also includes isolation, solitary confinement. Sometimes it includes sexual assault. Like, okay, so is that part of the justice? But you call it the justice system. So this is when sometimes my mind gets turned around the meaning of words. When I see society is not matching up with the meaning of words, I don't know how to answer it, if that makes sense.
No, I love that. And thank you for your realness and authenticity here. Because when I think about justice, it's really like thinking about what Dr. King said, that the arc of justice is long, but it bends, the arc of our universe is long, but it bends towards justice, right? But whenever I even heard that, the arc of the moral universe.
Yeah, what does it mean to you?
Yeah. And I think for me, it's a felt sense experience of being seen, heard, listened to, and most importantly, loved. And I think the injustices that, you, of course, have been advocating against, and I have been advocating against as well, are really felt sense experiences of cruelty, the opposite of love, right? Because just because someone is Black or brown or an immigrant or has just the wrong identity suit in our incarnations. So,
right. And when you ask like a person who is Black in America or queer in America, I
Muslim in
think about
America,
justice.
a Southern
Muslim in
person.
America, right? I think about justice. I'm just like,
I don't
I can't,
know.
almost can't comprehend what that means. And I never
Yeah,
thought about this. No one's ever asked me the question, and it's kind of disturbing. And I'm really kind of just processing it with you right now that
yeah,
I don't know what that looks like.
yeah.
When
And it's
someone gets shot in the street and killed by a cop, and a lot of times there's just impunity,
no
whether
consequences
they're Black or
whatsoever.
white or whatever, they're just a citizen, and the cops take the law, judge, jury, executioner right then and there, and
Yeah,
they just walk away. Like, I don't know what justice means when that's still happening.
yeah. When I was doing research on my book, and one of the most profound, I mean, there were so many profound facts that I identified, but I was reading a lot of indigenous authors, from this land previous to European contact, which isn't that long ago, in the span of human history, 400 years. And prisons never existed on this continent, on Turtle Island, until Europeans came here. And of course, the abolitionist movement talks a lot about that. But, for me, it feels like it's such a recent invention, right? But it's become such a foundational part of who we are as a society that so many of us can't even imagine a world without prison. We are imprisoned in the idea of a prison.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Yeah, totally. It's one of those things that we grow up with, and it's just a part of our reality, and many people don't question it. Which is why I wanted to do the Freedom Rising art exhibit that's in New York right now, that's featuring all incarcerated exceptional painters, because I wanted to confront society with it, because they're away, you can't see them, you can't smell them, you can't hear them, they're just kind of out of sight, out of mind. But like when we confront with the creation, these beautiful paintings, it really makes people realize, oh yeah, we live in a carceral state that incarcerates human beings at one of the highest rates in the world. Oh yeah. And I'm
yeah,
just cool. I go about my business, tax dollars go to fuel it. It's like a confrontation, because we don't question a lot of things. We don't question. We'd be
yeah.
surprised if we sat and sat with ourselves, away from social media, away from everything, and really sit and ask your question: what have I been taught throughout my life that I just never questioned?
Yes.
And sit and think what that is, and ponder on that. You'll be surprised at how unfree you really are.
And how many of your thoughts are not actually your own? How many of these beliefs, these biases that you hold are actually not your own, but you've
That
been
part.
infected by others, and you now believe this is who you are, but actually, if
It's scary
it's
when you
scary.
really sit down and do the work. It's
Yeah,
scary, and it's consistent work. It's not just like you sit down one time. Like I think about this every day now, but I used to not think about this.
yeah. So what do you do? Like, what are your practices that help you kind of become aware of these things you've taken in from the external world to help you come back to your true essence?
So I do have a philosophy and practice. It's called People Not Things, the same name as the book, and it's
Yes.
available for free on my website, peoplenotthings.com. You can download it. And it's a set of practices that include affirmations, journal questions, and a meditation I developed called conceptual resistance. So literally resisting your concept of reality using an inanimate object. So I describe the meditation, and what this meditation allows me to do is strengthens a muscle. And this muscle allows you to see multiple perspectives at once, right? Starting from just the line of sight of how you're looking at it, and imagining yourself in another position in the room.
Yeah.
Like of like you're over there and you're seeing what's behind me, you're seeing my paintings and all, like being hyper aware. Well, what am I hearing in the room? What am I hearing in the space? Hyper aware, but also realizing that your perspective is inherently wrong to everybody else.
Yeah.
It's right to you. I'm gonna validate your feelings, your experience. It's right to you, but nobody sees everything the same. No one sees
way.
one thing the same, right? And what does that do when you start to approach society in that way versus, well, you're not seeing it this way because da 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 da. That's what I had to do before I sat down with millennials who were neo-Confederates. I had to do this work with myself to be like, actually, this is what they're taught. This is their perspective, their experience. This was taught in their household. They are just the sum of their ideologies. Let me start with that and engage with them from there. Yeah,
so
so
powerful.
I got these practices, man. It's like something that it's a constant thing that I have to do so that I show up in the world and say, each human being that I approach today, I don't care if it's my Uber driver, I don't care if it's the CEO or a founder of this group or a janitor, they are a complex human being worthy of dignity first and foremost. And we start from there.
What you're describing, in my book, Breaking Bias, what you're describing is really this process of neuro-decolonization, really kind of decolonizing our minds, through these practices, because everything that, we're perpetuating in the world is a learned habit. So we're really unlearning them through the light of awareness, through mindfulness and visualization and other practices, affirmations that you've shared. So I'm curious, and you're welcome to say no, would you be willing to lead us in a short practice? It doesn't have to be the full thing. We're going to invite people to check out People Not Things, but just to kind of offer us a taste into this beautiful vision.
I don't lead the meditation. That's for an individual to lead themselves.
Interesting.
But I will say that the instructions on the meditation are available for free download on peoplenotthings.com.
That's amazing. And can you share more about why is that?
I don't want to be a leader. I realize that. I realize that me showing up in the world is enough. And people will ask me, well, what's your practice? Just like you just asked me what my practice is. I don't have to force it on anybody. I don't mind sharing it. But I think we have too many people who want to lead with wrong intention, especially in a society that's celebrity driven and money driven. And people think it's their time to exploit people looking for something outside of themselves. But I'm trying to cultivate leaders, people who are leading themselves, who aren't looking for anyone or anything outside themselves. Like, it's all in you. I don't have the answers for you. I have the answers for me, and I can share with you what my answers are, but you have to lead yourself, because I'm not about to be, put up on a pedestal just to be knocked down also, because that's a thing that happens here in America. And also, I'm not here to exploit and sell anything to you. You can buy my book if you want to. This is my poetry. But this philosophy and practice that I've developed, it's free. You can go download it. I'm not trying to sell it to you. It's what I do and how I show up in the world. So if you see me in an interview or see me out in the world, you're like, dang, how'd she get to that point? This is how. But you have to lead yourself. It's on you to do the work. I'm not going to do anything for you. I got enough people I'm trying to help out.
Including yourself, right?
Including myself.
Especially yourself. That's what I think the work of breaking bias is really, for me also, it's like starts here. We can basically write you a whole recipe, but we can't cook for you. You don't know what your taste buds are like, but you know the ingredients, right? But that's where that effort, the self-effort, really is important there.
Yeah. I would recommend, though, people really want to start doing that unpacking and deprogramming, to get sober, at least for a time, at least for a year, while you're doing that really intensive, because you don't want your mind to be skewed, and get off of social media. This is all in the practice and philosophy. I recommend this. Get off social media. Get off of substances. Figure out what thoughts are your own, right? And sit with those difficult things and work through it. And you can't do that if you're on substances. It just numbs it. It just pushes it down. Yeah, so that's my recommendation. It's all in the practice and philosophy of People Not Things.
I love that. And, that's been a practice of mine for a very long time also. Would you be willing to share a little bit more about your story, like around being sober and how it helped you kind of go inside?
I'm going to see if I can find. I have a poem called Sobriety.
Yes. Yes.
I'm going to try to find it real quick.
Yeah, take your time. This is exciting. That was going to be my next thing, that I'd love to hear some more words from you, but this is perfect.
Hopefully I'll be able to edit this part out of me sifting through the book. What you think?
It's cool.
Here it is.
There it is.
Shout out to my publisher, Andrews McNeil Publishing. They are amazing.
Yay.
And the next book that we do, we're going to have a table of contents.
Amen.
Okay. This poem's called Sobriety. Sitting with my discomfort, chased by memories, I stop running and call their bluff. Running towards nostalgia, difficult times, facing my shame, holding it tight for a time. Anger exhausts itself into a rolling calm, and every time I hold my shame and enter an embarrassing moment and relive every heartache, I set the table and feed my feels. Nourish them, welcome them, speak to them with compassion, hospitality. And after we eat, they do the dishes, they open the door, and they leave. Until next time, old friends.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite pieces.
I love it. And, it almost reminded me of one of Rumi's poems. I feel like your poem is the modern day version of it. The Guest House. I don't know if you've heard of this poem.
I love Rumi, though.
Yeah.
What a compliment.
Yeah. So, we're connected in that way, right? This was someone who lived, 1,000 years ago, 800 years ago. And his message is, timeless in that way to this day. So thank you for sharing that. I have one more, a couple of last questions for you as we close our conversation. So what are you up to nowadays? What are some projects that you're working on that people should, know about or look out for?
Thank you. People Not Things is something that I'm constantly working on. So I have my own solo exhibit called People Not Things. And I've recently stepped into the curator role. I told you that I'm curating an art exhibit that's showing in New York right now. I think it'll be over by the time of this taping. It's called Freedom Rising. Shout out to Middle Church and Reverend Jackie Lewis, who helped fund this exhibit. And it's all incarcerated artists, who are being held in Georgia Department of Corrections. So now that the flag has come down, I want to dedicate more of my time in my advocacy around prison reform and the dignity of people who are incarcerated, and using creativity as a means to showcase their dignity and their humanity. And hopefully that can change the heart of the public and make them question, why do we support such an institution that is egregious and harmful, rather than rehabilitative, rather than adding to the community, So that's really what I'm looking forward to. So People Not Things is something that I'll be doing my entire life, and working on the philosophy and the practice. I might do some online courses soon around kind of what we've just spoke about with the practice. I'm living my life, loving it, enjoying it, making love, making money when I can, have my dog, Kato the potato, my black lab. That's beautiful. I got my partner, my family's healthy. So yeah, I'm just enjoying life in the midst of all of it.
Yes. And isn't that a revolutionary act, right? To have enjoyment, to have joy amidst, just the suffering of our world, but know that it's really up to us to choose that over, what we choose really begins here. And it's a choice, really.
It's true. Gotta stay off social media. I'm on there to promote my things, but man, I struggle with social media. It really brings me down, man.
Yeah, no, and this is part of the loneliness pandemic, mental health pandemics that are happening globally, particularly among our young children. So yeah, I'm so glad that you were able to share some of those practices and tools around sobriety. It's so important, so powerful. One other thought that I wanted to ask you is, a lot of people that are watching this, that are listening to us, are just so unfamiliar about the American South and the realities there, particularly in places like Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
So, for a lot of people, particularly, more progressive and, living in the North, like, they're just not clued in around the day-to-day realities of what it's like to be, a Black person, a person of color, an immigrant, a poor person in the South. So would you have like any comments for them, just to kind of, from your personal experience? Yeah.
I'll give you negative and positive, because life is balanced.
Amen.
Just the other day, I was in Mississippi. I was out with my mom. My mom's a white woman from Wisconsin. A white woman, whatever that means. So
she's your mom.
Right. I go and run some errands with her. We go into the bank, and I'm like walking behind her, like 3 feet behind her. We walk and approach the line, and there's an older white gentleman. He turns around and sees my mom and gives her the most beautiful, welcoming smile, a little flirtatious, and then looks over her shoulder and sees me and scowls. And my mom saw it. And so often it's hard for white folks to understand, like, this is what happens to us in the world all the time, whether it's I don't know if he was scowling because I was queer, or, because I like present more masks, or because I'm Black, or a brown person. I don't know what it was, but he just, like, hatred just came over his face. And I had a conversation with my mom about it later, and she was shaken by it, because as a white person who walks around in a white place, that doesn't happen too much to her. We can say something else about being a woman, right? And that has its own issues and all of that, but she had never seen that type of switch, simply because her and I look different, and I had to explain to her, like, yeah, this is my reality when I walk around, especially in the Deep South, as far as how I present. And so that's the negative part of, like, but that can happen anywhere in the world. I was in Trinidad and was getting crazy looks, and these are all Black folk, you know what I mean? Because I, being queer, I suppose, I don't know. So that's one thing about growing up in the Deep South, being Black or brown or queer, or just not a white male. But also Mississippi's beautiful. Like, I rep my state wherever I go. I'm from Mississippi. I'm not from New York. I'm not from Atlanta. I'm from Mississippi. And you should go there. You should go and see for yourself how beautiful the state is. There's a lot of, we call it the hospitality state, because there is a lot of hospitality, and people are very sweet, very nice. Go down there and feed our tourist economy, go down there and invest, because I want my people to have jobs and thrive and make money. So I want people to come to my state and check it out for themselves. Yeah.
Amen. And it's just about exposure to ideas, right? The more people go down there, the more we can, help them stereotype, replace some of the things that they may have about people from outside of Mississippi, and build bridges and connections.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Genesis, for your time and your presence and your wisdom and all the love.
Thank you for having me, Anu.
Yeah.
I really appreciate the work that you do, and I'm in awe of you, and I'm really happy we could finally collaborate on something.
Yes.
Hopefully it won't be the last time.
No, it's the beginning. And we're going to be doing all sorts of things together. And, I've read People Not Things, and actually Sobriety was one of my favorite poems in there, which was, funny that you thought of that, because it reminded me of Rumi. And a lot of what you share in there is really the essence of what Breaking Bias is, and what, our movement's about, around building a beloved community. And what's really beautiful about People Not Things is that you've really written a manifesto that could be personalized by anyone, who wants to walk on this path of justice and love and kindness, even though you don't know what justice means yet. But at least having that hope in our hearts and minds. Yeah.
Action, just doing whatever you can do, what is within your control, to brighten someone else's day, to make someone else a little more free. Yes.
Well, thank you. These micro actions really, the ocean is made up of a lot of drops of water. So each of our actions and our thoughts and our words are part of that, droplets that shift the ocean of our consciousness.
That's right, poet. Speak
Inshallah.
on it. Inshallah.
All right, you all. Thank you, Genesis. Talk to you soon.